Hello everyone. Welcome to the Turkish Foreign Policy course. We will begin with Chapter 1, Determinants of Turkish Foreign Policy. In this chapter, we will firstly look into the determinants of Turkish foreign policy. Then we will talk about Turkish foreign policy in the interwar period, Turkey's Cold War policies, and lastly, foreign policy setting at the end of the Cold War. Let's start with determinants of Turkish foreign policy. Although Turkey is not one of the great powers, its geographical location, historical connections, and careful foreign policy has allowed it to play a more influential role in world politics than otherwise possible. In order to understand the long-term dynamics of Turkish foreign policy, it is important to determine the fundamental parameters that affect its policymaking as well as factors that limit its foreign policy choices. Structural determinants are continuous and static variables that shape a country's foreign policy. They are not directly related to the international political developments and current issues in international politics. They can have long-term impact on the determination of foreign policy, such as geographical position, historical experiences, and cultural background. Conjunctural determinants are dynamic variables that can change depending on the domestic and international developments. They can be considered as the changes in the international system, shifts in balance of power in world politics, dramatic changes in domestic politics, economic factors. Despite frequent internal changes, the structural determinants provide a significant degree of continuity in Turkish foreign policy. Due to the strong influence of structural determinants, Turkish foreign policy has benefited from its rationality, sense of responsibility, long-term perspective, and realism. Let's move on to Turkish foreign policy in the interwar period. The Republic of Turkey gained its independence at a time when the world was passing through a systemic change. It was Mustafa Kemal's influence at that moment that set the course of Turkish foreign policy in much of the 20th century. His foreign policy approach, like his political views, represented a break with the past. While the grand ideas of the late Ottoman Empire were discarded, he insisted on replacing them with the principles of republicanism, secularism, and nationalism, all of which had major impacts on the country's foreign policy in addition to its domestic policy. From this perspective, there was a vital connection between foreign and domestic policies of the country, and Atatürk's foreign policy was essentially an extension of his domestic policy. As understood from his famous motto, "Peace at home, peace in the world," he was connecting internal stability with the international peace and order. In order to have peaceful foreign policy and a stable country, it was necessary to deal with the domestic politics first. The main concern of the early Republican foreign policy was to achieve and protect the complete independence of the state after the national struggle. Therefore, the ideas of accepting the mandate or protectorate of a foreign power was rejected from the beginning. However, this principle was not regarded as a barrier against forming alliances or signing political and military agreements with other countries. Now let's try to summarize Turkey's Cold War policies between 1945 and 1980. While Turkey was busy in the 1930s with its nation-building and state-building processes, as well as shaping its international relations, the world was heading toward another world war. Early in this period, the main concern of Turkey became to protect its national sovereignty and territorial integrity in the coming world war. Eventually, Turkey was able to avoid the war and most of its destructive aspects thanks to the realistic and pragmatic policies of then decision-makers by aligning Turkey with France and Great Britain in 1939 and by concluding treaties of alliance and non-aggression with all the belligerent parties except Italy and Japan. In terms of the systemic factors, the transformation of the international system into a bipolar structure forced Turkey to choose a side. Compared to the previous periods, now Turkey did not have the option to adopt a policy of neutrality. With the declaration of the Truman Doctrine in 1947 and the Marshall Plan in 1948, Turkey's connection with the U.S. was established, leading to Turkey's Western dependency in 1950s and beyond. The final point of Turkey's Western connection in security and military terms was its membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. In the context of post-World War environment, in order to meet the perceived Soviet threat on its borders, Turkish leaders did not see any other alternative but to join the Western alliance system. The new domestic political structure created by the 1961 Turkish constitution led to further fragmentation of parties and the party system. The new political atmosphere also helped discuss and criticize foreign policies of the government. Meanwhile, there was another important development in the Republican People's Party that had crucial effect afterwards on Turkish foreign policy. The Cyprus issue also became a catalyst for a dramatic change in Turkish foreign policy during the 1970s. The 1974 crisis did not only increase the antagonism between Greece and Turkey, but also strained Turkish-American relations to the breaking point. Thus, as the Turkish army was able to control about 40% of Cyprus by August 1974, and in return, the US imposed arms embargo on Turkey in February 1975. Then Turkey decided to suspend all activities at the American bases in Turkey except the NATO bases. Our last topic for this program is foreign policy setting at the end of the Cold War. Foreign policy inclinations of Turkey changed during the inter-coup period, that is between 1960 and 1980. However, Turkey did not change the foundations of its foreign policy. While still maintaining the principles of identification and alliance with the West, the pursuit of national interests in foreign policy and the increasing independence in making its foreign policy choices became Turkey's priorities. The military coup d'etat of September 12, 1980 became, in the longer run, an important watershed as it brought about fundamental changes to the domestic politics, sociology, economics, and consequently, foreign policy of Turkey. The major transformations that Turkey had to go through as a result of or in connection with the coup in the 1980s had considerable impact on its international relations as well. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 triggered an enormous transformation in Eurasia that had serious impact on Turkish foreign and security policies. With the emergence of 6 independent Muslim states to its northeast and the presence of 150 million Muslim Turkic speakers in these countries, pan-Turkist ideas started to be circulated in Turkey. However, it soon became clear that Turkey had limited capacity in terms of its economic, political, and social characteristics to meet the overwhelming needs of these newly independent countries. With the new changes, Turkey focused on building stronger relations with the Middle East during the 1910s. Both security and strategic reasons and ideological or political choices played a part in this policy shift because there was an increasing threat perception from the region, including a number of US interventions and the continuing threat of terrorist organizations. So, this is the end of our program for Chapter 1 of the Turkish Foreign Policy course. Goodbye and see you in our next program, Chapter 2.